This is the first step. This is how I create forms that I can then use as a master for the different shapes of vessel, but also vessels out of different materials. So these can be used to make moulds to then cast jesmonite, but then I also use them to create the pattern for the vessels made out of fabric. So there's my mould. Just fill it up with a bit of water.
So it's this one. And are you using something? Are you putting the molds straight in there?
I'm putting plaster straight in there, but I'm going to mix it. Mixing the plaster, just mixing a really small amount because you don't need very much, and you always put the plaster in on top of the water. Actually, I might not have mixed enough. There you go. Just make it onto the water, and then you just mix it up. Make sure you get the lumps out. And then pour it in the mould. The plaster's set. Yeah. That's the plaster. The next thing to do is to carve it. The plaster's set, but it's still damp. You can really start carving it very easily. If you waited till it was really dry, it would be very difficult to do. So I'm just using an old kitchen knife, making the shape rounded. Just basically doing quite a lot of the rough work with a knife. Just beginning to be more like a vessel shape.
And may I ask why you chose to do vessels for the ladies?
Vessels. Well, a vessel is symbolic of, can be considered to be symbolic of a female. The female form is a vessel. You know, it has a womb. We are the species that we're the people who give birth to other human beings. So we are the vessel of humanity. Whoa. And in a very abstract way, I tell you what, the vessels kind of remind me of sort of Edwardian lady silhouette, when they were very much every kind of bosoms were flattened and rounded. You know, they were just a gentle curve, and Victorian times too. And then in the 1920s, 30s, of course, you were kind of completely flattened out. So it was almost in denial that you had breasts. You can really see it's starting to shape now. And you can only do so much when it's this wet. I'll do a little bit more, just to get it a bit smoother, a bit more even. It's probably as smooth as I can get it whilst it's this damp. Okay. Now, instead of using the knife, which is quite much, you can carry on using it a bit. It's a bit rough. if I start using the scalpel, you can see the difference in
Because now it's drier.
it's a bit dry, and you can get a bit more detail, and it's just a question of going over it and getting the form. Now, if I'm just finding a form for doing the textile ones, it doesn't matter how accurate it is. And when that's really dry, what I'll just do is give it a bit of a rub with a bit of wet and dry sandpaper, and that will take out any of these little bumps that are left over. So when this one is dry and smooth, what I will do next to make it a mould so that I can make the Jesmonite vessels, ones like these, is to make a mould from it. And what I start doing is using Vinymould, and you just melt that on your
saucepan.
In your saucepan, an old saucepan. You can see it's really old.
Well used.
And you kind of you need to make a little bit of a wall. I can use the same wall system that I use for my plaster, and you put the vessel on there. You create a wall around it, and then the Vinymould gets liquid when it's warm, and then you can create the mould. And this is the way it would have been. And then you can see inside, that's the mould. What's really good about Vinymould is you can cut it and hold it together. And when I cast this one, I would have put an elastic band around it. It's not particularly good. It doesn't last. It's all starting to go tacky, and it doesn't give a particularly good surface either. So when I've got a really nice Jesmonite one, you can see this one is one that's come out of a silicone rubber mould. So when I've got a really nice smooth one, then I'll make a silicone rubber mould because they last a long time. There's quite a few here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Jesmonite is a liquid again, a bit like plaster, a little bit thicker than the plaster when I was mixing it, and you can pour it in and just scoop it around until it dries. So the moulds have, with the silicone rubber, you have to make a two-part mould because it's much more solid. So I'm just trying to find two that match up. These two match up. This is number 2. So I've had to cut that in the middle, and you can see on this mould, the plaster one, where I've marked the plaster by cutting it to get it out of the silicone rubber. And then what that means when you make the Jesmonite is you end up with a little rim where your mould was separated, and you just have to clean that up. So these plaster shapes, as I said, are used for they're used for the textile fabric vessels, but they're also used as to make the moulds for the Jesmonite, and then they influence the shape of the metal ones as well. So this is the starting point for all of that. So the next step, because I want to use this for the fabric, is to work out the pattern to make, and I've got lots of ones I've made before here, and then so I break the unit up into 8. So just do it a bit roughly. Draw down the middle. Draw down the other quarter, and then find the middle of that. And what I'm then doing is measuring the widest point, just taking measurements. So that's, I'm doing that in inches. So that's 1.5 in the middle. At the top it's 8.8, and at the bottom it's 0.9. And then the length, you have to go along the curve, 6.8. represents that. So let's take a middle line. Measure 6.8. And then I've got to do find a bit of my thing. 0.4 centimetres, 4 millimetres each side, and 4.5 shapes. And I have to cut them out. But I have to allow for little seam allowances. So if I just draw.
So this is to create the pattern for
the vessel. So
the textile vessels.
Yeah. So this, if you do it this way, you need 8. But actually, what my experience has shown me is it makes a fatter vessel than you want. So what I do is I carry on with this measurement for 8. If you then have 7, it turns out the same shape as the mould, just because of giving a bit more seam allowance than perhaps I should. But rather than cut each side, I want to make sure that they're the same. Fold it in half. And just check whether that adds. So that's actually quite. Each side is the same. So you've got to remember that that's the top. That's the bottom. There's my pattern. So the fabric I'm using is cotton organza, and the place that I got it from in London, it comes in lots of different colours, and I have dyed quite a bit of it, but this one is just navy. So this is the vessel I'm doing, which are
It's because we have seen in the exhibition that you have some vessels that they have different colours, like pink with some details and grey with indigo. So that are dyed.
They're dyed, yeah. But these ones we're going to have a different technique on.
Okay.
Because these are for Greek grandmothers.
Oh.
They're quite glitzy characters.
How exciting!
So first of all, I need to cut out 7 little fabric pieces very carefully. And because I trained as a jeweller, the scale of work is quite familiar to me, and I'm really quite comfortable with working with such small pieces of fabric. It's 2, so I folded that over to get 2. I don't fold it any more than that, just because you lose accuracy when you're cutting too many layers. So just rather do it gradually. So what I really like about these vessels is all the different levels of process that you do. So it's not just one technique, it's bringing together lots of different techniques that I've learnt over the years.
And materials.
And materials, yeah. So, you know, in this instance, the plaster is being used to create the original shape that you can work from, but I have used it in work on its own because it's an interesting moulding material.